Welcome to Withdraw Consent. I'm Jack, joined with Gerron again today, who's going to talk about this Bonhoeffer movie, and that he. So you got to go see it, right?
I did.
And what were the circumstances of you getting the tickets?
So basically, there's a guy that I know. He had 7 extra tickets he bought, but I guess the people he was going to go see it with were all out of town or something, some weird situation.
Is he pro this kind of content, or
Yeah, definitely.
okay? So what's the movie about?
So Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a Lutheran pastor. He grew up. He was born a few years before World War One started. His brother died in the war, and then, long story short, he goes to America for seminary, comes back to Germany during Hitler's rise to power, and he basically his view is that the church has been taken over by the Nazis, and so his goal is to try to convince people that Hitler's bad and
Wait,
that they're persecuting.
when
Hmm?
you say the church, because he was a Lutheran, so he's not talking about the Catholic Church.
He is talking about the Catholic Church
Okay,
because the Catholic Church was pretty dominant.
okay,
Um, but his view that's shown in the movie is that it's not about religion, it's about a relationship, and it's very like anti-religious structure, so to speak.
okay.
Bonhoeffer, he preaches, he opposes the church that is supportive of the National Socialist Party. And then he essentially becomes a assassin. He tries to.
Wait,
Uh,
when he's preaching against them, what part of National Socialism does he not like? Is he like against families? Or like what is his angle? Is it the stuff about the Jews?
yeah, that he's very against the quote persecution of the Jews, and he's also an ecumenist. So he believes that all the churches should be like united, regardless of what their different individual beliefs are.
Is he Jewish?
No.
Okay, just wondering. Okay, continue on. So he becomes an assassin now, or something.
And this is a really brief rundown of the story. It's not like he just goes there and then decides to kill Hitler, but he sees that as the last opportunity to save Germany from the scourge of National Socialism. He's obviously not successful, and he gets hung 2 weeks before the war ended. Now, as far as the history goes of the story of the movie, it's relatively accurate, I would say, as far as what you would find just by looking him up. The problem is the movie's extremely embellished, and it it really whitewashes the whole situation. So when he goes to America, the first thing, I was watching it with a friend who was kind of not exactly on board with like all the stuff we talk about necessarily, but it's like they were even like, okay, this is a little crazy. But so he goes to New York, to Harlem, which is true, to seminary. And the first thing I noticed, he's sitting next to a black guy in seminary, and I'm like, okay, weren't they segregated? I mean, they might not have been there. I don't know, but it just seems a little off. And then this guy introduces him to like jazz, and so they walk into this jazz theater in Harlem, and Dietrich, he's just like, what is this? I've never seen anything like this. And the guy that he's with is like, this is jazz. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but wouldn't the Germans have been exposed to jazz music long before then?
Yeah, you'd think so.
Yeah, like, I mean, it's not like, I mean, the Weimar Republic was a really backward place, but I mean, they would have known at least what jazz music is.
Right, right.
And then so the guy who's playing the piano just gets up. Dietrich Bonhoeffer sits down at the piano, just starts playing, and then everyone else starts playing around him. It's like out of a soap opera almost. It's
I
pretty
see.
hilarious. Then he goes out of the building with the black guy, and he's just walking down the street. They go to stay at some hotel for some random reason, and this guy comes out with a shotgun. He's like, "You're black man. How dare you knock on the door?" And then from that point, and he like shoves Dietrich in the face with the butt of his gun, and Dietrich's like, "Okay, I'm gonna dedicate my life to fighting hate. Where's all the hate going on?" Well, he goes back to Germany in, I think, 1932 or 33, right after Hitler gets elected. And guess what his family says as soon as he gets to the dinner table?
They all got exterminated. Their friends got exterminated. I don't know.
No, they're basically like, "Oh, he's going after the Jews. Why would they ever do that? They're not, what are they doing?" And if you've seen videos on this show before, I mean, the assassinations in the parliament, and it was no secret, like the whole thing with communism. And communism was never brought up at all in this movie. It's always, oh, the Nazis are gonna, they're gonna kill all the Jews, so we need to stand up and oppose this evil. And then it has a really funny scene. It's in black and white, and it's these German guys. I thought when I first saw it, I thought it was an actual clip from history, but then the guy speaks English and he says, "We are going to replace the Jews, and we are going to exterminate them, and we are going to replace all crosses across the Reich with a swastika." And we're just cracking up. We're like, okay, this is so bad. Because correct me if I'm wrong, but wouldn't replacing all the cross with the swastika like alienate most of his supporters?
Yeah, the entire because he wants those conservative supporters, which is why he didn't shut down the churches.
Yeah, exactly. And then they fast forward a little. He goes to this kind of school in I forget if it's in Germany or if it's like in England or something, but there he pulls out this Bible and he says, "This Bible here has two extra commandments: honor thy Führer and thy mother," and something about like they have everyone has to be Aryan or something like that. And
That's just completely made up.
yeah. Do you know of any kind of Bible like that was ever
No, if there
published?
was, you would have that in every piece of propaganda because that would be substantial,
Exactly.
right?
And then I'm just gonna fast forward because a lot of the movies just kind of the plotting. It was a good movie. It just was extreme. Like we could tell really easily what the narrative behind it was. So the Germans are very anti-Christian throughout the movie. Although, well, there's the church of the official state church, and they're consistently viewed, like Bonhoeffer calls them, Pharisees, basically, which is ironic. Um, and we've lost sight of God, and we just want you've replaced God with Hitler. Basically, that's his narrative, his main focus. Um, I can understand his point to a certain extent, but the way that his this whole thing is gone through, it just it's just really exaggerated. Another thing about Bonhoeffer too is that he was an ecumenist. Like I mentioned, his work was an early prelude to the founding of the World Council of Churches. Are you familiar with that?
No.
It's basically the idea to bring like all it's a governing body of most of the churches in the world, but it has a lot of elements of, I mean, it's like eventually the end result of ecumenism is to bring Judaism and Islam eventually. It's essentially the idea that no matter what religion we are, we're all worshiping the same God. That's basically the idea. And Bonhoeffer was his work kind of led to that organization being founded. As far as the rest of the movie, worst portrayal I've ever seen of Hitler. He looked like he was about 30. His mustache was really wide, and he said something like, he said, uh, I forget what he said, but it was just so stereotypically like a way that they wanted to, demonize Hitler. Um, the and that movie ended with him getting hung because he smuggled some Jews out of the country. He smuggled like 7 Jews into Switzerland with the help of some other German guy, and they like escaped from a prison camp with and they escape as as they're walking out, they're talking for like 5 minutes about what are we going to do now. We've escaped, but we can't just leave. There's troops all over the place, and they're just kind of standing there. One guy makes a run for it, and then he gets shot. But the shot comes from a guy who's standing in a bunker that's right next to where they are. Just, I mean, why not just capture them right there, you know?
Yeah.
But the movie ends. He gets hung.
How does he try to kill Hitler? What's his method?
Oh, how suicide vest,
What is that? He's gonna go blow himself up?
basically.
Okay, so like just the idea of a Lutheran pastor who says, okay, this guy's bad, I'm gonna go blow him up.
hmm
How do you portray that guy as the good guy? You're a pastor who's going to hell, right? Right?
Well, I'm gonna actually address that. So the way that the movie shows it, I'm glad you brought that up too. Is so his attempts at preaching against the Hitler and the Nazis doesn't go so well for him. He So that's kind of like a last ditch effort. So he meets these other 2 people that are also plotting in this old abandoned shack, and that's the question he has too. And the people are asking, or he said basically, or someone asked him, how could we could God forgive you for assassinating someone? I mean, like you said, you're a pastor and we're supposed to love our enemies. But then he used the example, if there was a bus that was running over kids, wouldn't it be my responsibility to kill the bus driver or whatever? And then he says, would God forgive us? Or they ask him, would God forgive us if we do this? And then Bonhoeffer's response is, would God forgive us if we don't?
Oh my gosh.
So,
Assassinating. Oh my
yeah,
gosh. It's not the same as the bus running over children. It's
yeah,
different.
exactly.
It's I don't like your politics,
hmm
right?
Yeah, basically. And also, they also were talking about how the Jews were being exterminated in all these camps. They didn't even, I mean, your average German didn't even know about, like, even if you take the whole Holocaust narrative at face value, even according to the mainstream narrative, they didn't even know that these camps existed until like after the war, right? And they got that information from the Russians when they came through, right?
Right, right.
So how would he have even known? Like it seems a little odd.
I would love to scour the German newspapers of the time and see what it was like. You know, the
Yeah,
domestic
for
coverage, not the war coverage.
definitely. And also, where's any mention of socialism or communism in the movie? Because any German that they would have run into in the movie, it would have had an easy answer of why they don't like the Jews, why they don't like the socialists. But it's always treated as, oh, they just woke up one day and wanted to murder all the Jews. And I even brought this up to my friend. I said, 1933, we did the episode on the Havara Agreement, the transfer agreement.
Yeah.
Hitler was the only guy that actually actively tried to get Jews, help them get to the Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted to get them somewhere else, like Madagascar or wherever, but that ultimately didn't end up working out. But it's just so anachronistic with how they portray it. And also, you remember the newspaper Judea declares war on
Yeah.
Germany because they don't like that he's shutting down the banks and all that stuff. Like,
Yeah.
so when they asked how could anyone be against the Jews in that movie, we're all brothers in God, we worship the same God, which goes back to the ecumenism. We all worship the same God.
I see.
But I told my friend, I'm like, yeah, no one in Germany in 32 or 33 would be asking that question.
Yeah, and that's not biblical at all. We're all worshiping the same
Exactly.
God. That's not biblical.
Hmm.
Islam doesn't agree. Christianity shouldn't agree. And we know who
I
Judaism's
w-
serving.
I was out in the mountains a few like couple months ago, and ran into this pastor. We were at the hot springs. It was we had an interesting conversation, but I asked him like the Jew. So would the Jews and Christians, do they worship the same God? They just don't worship Christ. And he said, yeah, yeah, basically. I mean, it's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? But then I asked, but it's the Trinity too, and if Christ is God, correct? Yeah. Well, if he's God and they don't worship him, how could they be worship the same God? It doesn't make any sense. And he's like,
Interesting.
okay, I
Interesting.
yeah,
That's a good point.
but
It
mhm,
also seems to me, though, if you're a pastor and then you're looking at what's going on in National Socialist Germany, and you're
mhm,
like, okay, here's what we need to do. We need to reverse everything Hitler's doing. So we need to bring back some pedophilia, right?
uh-huh,
We need to get that sex trafficking going. We need to get the animal experimentation going. We need more people smoking cigarettes. We need more prostitutes in the street. Like, how is that your Christian position? I
yeah,
morally, I just
exactly.
can't understand. You know what I'm saying?
There's only one explanation I can think of. Well, unless he could have been a foreign asset in a sense too. We don't know, but he spent most of those years in. Actually, let me see what because he spent a good amount of time in America with Abyssinian Baptists, which Ethiopian Baptists basically.
Okay, okay.
So
I
I'm
thought you
just
said
gonna
7 years he was in the U.S.
wait a second. No, that wouldn't even be an excuse because it says at age 21 on December 17th, 1927, he completed his Doctor of Theology degree from a university in Berlin. Studies in America. In 1930, he moved to America. So he definitely would have known what was going on. So that's not an excuse.
Oh, I see. I see. Interesting.
Hmm.
So that was just in how they portrayed him in the movie. That's where the
Exactly.
difference comes. Okay,
And they
I'm definitely not going to see it.
oh,
The movie.
and they also portray him basically as never even have heard of Hitler before, but like before he comes back to Germany. It's like, okay, really?
Wow, that's far
Yeah.
fetched.
And then there's one more point I want to make. So after he gets hung at the end of the movie, which is true, uh, and it says basically the end, like the right before the credits, it's like on the black screen with white words. So it says, 2 weeks later, Hitler killed himself, and the war ended shortly after. Over 6 million Jews were killed in Germany and through the Holocaust and World War II, and along with many other people that weren't considered Aryan or ethnically pure. And then it says 2023 has been the worst year of anti-Semitism since World War II. Stand up against anti-Semitism, do your part, blah blah blah. And I'm like, oh, okay. I could have predicted the movie was going that direction.
That's interesting. I've never heard the claim of like the 11 million people that 11 to 12 million people they claim were killed. I have
Uh
never
huh.
heard the claim before in my life that anybody was killed because they were not Aryan enough.
Yeah.
I've never heard that claim. I've heard it's because you're Jews, because you're gypsies, Roma, because you're homosexual. You know what I'm saying?
When I said that, I didn't. It's not so much that they're not pure. What I meant was like I forget what it actually said, but it did say like people that were considered like not
Okay,
like
okay.
yeah that category. So yeah, that's a
Okay, okay.
correction.
Okay. Well, I think this is pretty interesting. I'm definitely not going to see the movie, right? Because you wouldn't pay to
Oh,
go see it, would you?
no,
Unless you wanted to just for critiquing it, I would say.
maybe
That would be the only point.
yeah,
Anyways,
but I'd probably get charged interest on the ticket. So
pretty funny. All
yeah.
right. Well, okay. So basically, that's what we got for you. I appreciate you for coming on, Gerron.
Mhm.
All right. Hope you guys have a great weekend.
Sounds good. You as well.